I refuse to hate watch a movie. Every movie that I go into, I truly expect to enjoy it. Like, otherwise, what is the point? Like, it's also why, I scan through mountains of horror movies and I skip a lot of them because I have no desire to, like, knowingly watch a bad movie. There's just too many quality films out there to open up that can of worms. So, what does that say about The Offering? The Offering is a 2022 horror movie about a married couple going to the husband's family's home to make amends before their baby is born, only to unwittingly let loose a demon that's out for children. I think. At least that's what it says it's trying to do in the beginning, but then it seems to be kind of cool with whatever. So I'm not really sure if that is true anymore. First off, I was really intrigued when I saw the synopsis for this movie because it's set in an Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York. Now, I've seen tons of horror movies that deal with religion, but it's mostly of the Catholic variety: exorcisms, churches, monasteries, convents, rectories, etc. But I don't know if I've ever seen one that's based around the Jewish faith. So I thought that was like really different. And the fact that I live in Brooklyn now and am very familiar with that community only intrigued me more because I know them to be a very devout and private community full of sort of rituals and ceremonies. So I thought that was kind of a nice, ripe canvas for a horror movie. Unfortunately, this movie seems to kind of get bogged down with all the same problems of any other type of religious horror movie, just with different window dressing, which is really disappointing for sure. Normally, I'd now start this section by saying, well, the movie centers around blah, 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 but I'm not entirely sure who this movie centers around. Like, I can tell you what it wants to be centered around. Like, the movie begins with a prologue that discusses an ancient demon of many names, but all of those names point back to the same meaning: the taker of children. Now, I love that. Now, I may have mentioned in a previous video, I think it was the Viking Wolf video, but I love prologues. Like, there's something about text on screen before a movie that just sucks me right into a story. So, good so far. The movie then opens in earnest with an elderly man who's performing some kind of a ritual. Like, he puts himself in some protective circle and just gets to work. And this is where the first kind of uh-oh popped into my head. Like, they show a lot here. Way too much, in my opinion. We see him performing this ritual, talking to his dead wife, talking to a ghost child, talking about a life for a life deal, and then he just decides he's no longer going to go along with this and allows the entity to enter him, and he kills himself. Now, my personal nitpicky opinion here is they just show way too much in the opening of this movie. Like, a cold open to me should be brief and leave as many questions as possible. In the first 5 minutes of this movie, we already know who the ghost will show itself as, what its modus operandi is, and that it makes some kind of a deal, how it enters bodies, and that it can be controlled and contained. This is way too much information for a cold open. We are then introduced to Claire and Art, who arrive at Art's childhood home, which is also a funeral parlor, which is the family business. Claire is pregnant, and there seems to be some tension among the family because Art married outside of the faith. But they hope to kind of put things right with the fact that the baby's on the way, and they're hoping that this is a good time to sort of make amends. And this reunion of sorts between Art, Claire, and Saul, Art's dad, seems to kind of go fine at first. And it appears that past transgressions are water under the bridge and everything seems like it's moving along just fine. Then the plot kind of kicks into action when the body of that same old man from the cold open shows up in the funeral parlor with the knife sticking out of his chest. At the same time, we're also introduced to Hamish, who works the funeral parlor with Saul and seems to have a tense relationship with Art, which I don't think was ever really explained, explored, or resolved. But, that's kind of par for the course for this movie. So with Art left alone with the dead body while Hamish and Saul do something, Art finds and accidentally breaks an amulet on the old man's chest, which partially releases the demon, kicking off this whole entire plot. And this is all fine and good. But this is also where the movie kind of starts to coast a bit. Like, it really takes a while to get going. And normally I love those types of movies. But this one has a central issue that I just don't like in horror movies, where the protagonists just aren't aware of the fundamental problem of the movie until two-thirds into the movie or even later. Instead, we're treated to this sort of these disconnected little scare moments. Like, Claire sees the ghost of the old man. She sees the ghost of this little girl that went missing. Art hears these strange noises and voices in his head. Lights flicker on and off at random times. Hands appear behind coats and mirrors. Strange audio is heard. Like, it's all very standard. But then, of course, no one actually does anything about that. And so it ends up feeling like it takes an hour of the movie to travel an inch. Because as the audience, I already know so much more than what the characters do, and I'm just waiting for them to catch up. Like, the only progress that's actually made is when Saul finds the knife that killed the old man, and it has like a bunch of text on the handle. So he calls this expert, and the expert says, well, don't worry about it unless there's an amulet that goes with it.
No pendant, no seal. Which means there's no way you picked up a body containing a demon.
And of course, he didn't find the amulet. Art did, and who kicked it into a storm drain. So now we know that this movie is not really going to move forward until that amulet is found. So with that, the movie kind of plods along and sets up a few of the little story situations where, like, Art is having financial troubles and he needs to get Saul to sign over the house of the funeral parlor so that he can make some sort of real estate deal. And of course, that brings tensions between him and Claire, because Claire quit her job because she thought that Art would be able to take care of them financially. Saul is conducting family business with the funeral parlor. And so all of that is happening, but nothing is really moving forward. It's all just sort of things that are going on all at the same time. And that kind of leads me to feel like this movie was always at arm's length with me. Like, it never sucked me in because it never really settled on a particular person that I felt like I should care about or follow. It seems like it was going to be Claire, which makes total sense because she is new in this world and doesn't quite understand its culture. And she's also pregnant. And at the same time, we're told that this entity wants children. So that makes natural sense. But then she kind of just wanders around and just like sees spooky things. And then it makes it worse because she sees this ghost who convinces her to burn the amulet, which then sets the demon free. And then at which point she just kind of gets tossed to the background for the remainder of the film. Then I thought it was going to be Art as the main character. But he seems kind of weak and corruptible. And other than really kicking the whole thing off by breaking the amulet in the first place and finding a videotape of the first ritual by the old man, he doesn't really do much. Which, by the way, here are 2 tips for you that if you're looking to perform some kind of demonic ritual. If you have decided on sacrificing a local girl in order to bring your dead wife back, maybe don't film it. Maybe don't put it on videotape. And if you do decide to film it, maybe you should plug the camera in, or at least use a battery that has more than 4 minutes remaining. I mean, come on, that's rookie stuff. All right, so in order to talk any more, I'm going to kind of have to wade into spoiler territory, so you may want to skip ahead if you don't want to hear any of this. Now, the dad seems to be the only one that was willing to do any sort of investigative work and kind of pushing the plot forward. He finds the knife, he calls the experts, he gets the info about the demon itself, but then he kind of dies fairly quickly. And so then you have no one in the story left that understands what is going on because they have their own stuff happening and nothing is really getting done to advance the plot of the movie. That is, until the entity shows up and then does it for them by appearing in front of Claire and convincing her to find and burn the amulet. At that point, it captures Claire, and then it tries to get into some sort of arrangement with Art where it becomes a life for a life, bring this demon a child, and it'll let its wife go, which, to be honest, that's an interesting idea. And it signifies that the demon cannot get a child itself, and it requires the intervention from a person. So this deal is extremely important to this demon for survival. But that's kind of dropped almost immediately. Like, Art calls Hamish instead. They then bring in the expert. The expert just tells Art to stand inside of a circle. Then kind of a bunch of things fly around, and the demon just kills everyone, and then at the end, the CGI demon bites the camera. God, do I hate that. I hate that so much. But that being said, my larger problem here is I still don't understand what the demon was looking for. Like, he keeps talking about a deal of a life for a life.
A life for a life. A life for a life.
But it's also said to be a trickster that plays with your mind. I mean, it seemingly tries to get Art on the hook like the old man did, where bring me some children and then I will give you something, right? In this case, he would give him back Claire. But then once things start getting going, it just kills everyone in the room, seemingly cutting off its own potential food supply. So I just don't know. Okay, here's something positive I do want to say about this movie. This movie has an excellent production design. Like, every location feels full and lived in. The art department did a fantastic job really telling the story of the space visually. Although I was pretty sure the moment I saw the house, it was not a Brooklyn apartment. This thing is enormous. Sure enough, I looked up the filming location, and the filming location was in Bulgaria. So I'm assuming they built most of these sets, mainly because of the amount of destruction later on, but also because of the lighting, which was a bit of a giveaway. I mentioned before how much I notice lighting in movies. I mean, probably because, I've worked as a DP in the business for a while, but I just did not like the lighting in this movie. But maybe for the opposite reason than would be obvious. Like, it's just too polished. In my opinion, the reason why Hollywood horror movies have an uphill climb is because there's too much polish that goes into the look and feel of it. For a horror movie, it needs to look natural or somewhat real, making you feel like what you're seeing is in a real world. Make that suspension of disbelief as big as humanly possible. But with this movie, the entire thing is lit like a TV set. Lots of lights everywhere. There's always a light above, just out of frame. Every time we see Claire, she's lit to perfection and just looks flawless. Key lights, fills, negative fills, backlights, hair lights. It gives off this soft, strange separation of the actor from its setting, which is a shame given how good the settings are. And so they don't feel like they're part of it. They feel like they're just in front of it. And that just gives this very detached feeling to me. It's definitely a strange thing where high quality lighting somehow hurts a film, but I really think that happens a lot in horror. Overall, this movie was disappointing, especially given its very interesting premise and setup. Like, it had excellent production design, but with the uneven acting at times, I just think it could have used more work on making the main characters more central to the plot. Like, you have a demon that wants children on one hand and a pregnant woman on the other. Like, that is an inherent conflict that is written for you, staring you in the face. But instead, she's just kind of kept busy until the end of the movie, where she's just then used as a prop. I'd give this movie a C+. Let me know what you think.